The desert sprawls endlessly in every direction, dry and silent, humming with secrets that few dare to speak aloud. Somewhere in the Nevada wilderness, past forgotten dirt roads and behind razor-wire fences, lies the extraordinary story of a man who claimed to have touched the impossible. A man who said he worked on technology that shouldn't exist, in a place that officially doesn't exist, on craft that supposedly came from another world entirely. This is the story of Bob Lazar, and it's about to change everything you think you know about what's really happening in the shadows of our government. Now, before we dive deep into this rabbit hole, let me be crystal clear about something. The story you're about to hear has been dissected, analyzed, attacked, and defended for over 3 decades. Some call Bob Lazar a whistleblower. Others call him a fraud. But here's what nobody can argue with. His claims have shaped UFO research, influenced government disclosure, and sparked conversations that continue to this day. What I'm going to do is walk you through his shocking revelations, examine the evidence both for and against his story, and let you decide for yourself whether we're dealing with the greatest UFO disclosure in history or one of the most elaborate hoaxes ever conceived. But first, let me tell you why this matters more now than ever before. In recent years, we've seen unprecedented government acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena. The Pentagon has released videos. Military personnel have testified before Congress. And suddenly, things that Bob Lazar described back in 1989 don't sound quite so crazy anymore. So who exactly is Bob Lazar? On the surface, he seems like an ordinary guy. Born in 1959, raised in Florida, he developed a fascination with technology from an early age. Rockets, electronics, lasers, anything with wires or the potential to explode captured his imagination. By the 1980s, he'd made his way to Las Vegas, where he claimed to work as a physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory. But here's where things get interesting, and frankly, where the controversy begins. Official records from Los Alamos are murky at best. Some sources suggest he never worked there in any significant capacity. Others point to evidence that he was indeed employed there, at least as a contractor. A 1982 phone book listing and a newspaper article featuring his work seem to support his claims, but his alleged educational credentials from MIT and Caltech have never been verified. This ambiguity would become a recurring theme in Lazar's story. Every piece of evidence seems to come with a counter-argument. Every verification seems to be met with an equally compelling debunking. But in 1989, none of that mattered to the general public, because Bob Lazar was about to make claims so extraordinary that they would overshadow every question about his background. Picture this. It's a warm evening in Las Vegas, and a man sits in shadow, his face obscured, his voice disguised. He's using the alias Dennis because he's terrified of what might happen if his real identity becomes known. And then, calmly and methodically, he begins to describe something that sounds like pure science fiction. He claims he worked at a facility called S4, located about 15 miles south of the infamous Area 51. He describes 9 extraterrestrial spacecraft, stored in hangars carved into the mountainside, each one representing technology so advanced that it operates on principles our science barely understands. He talks about anti-gravity propulsion systems, powered by a mysterious element that didn't even exist on Earth's periodic table. But here's what made his claims so compelling: the details. This wasn't some wild-eyed conspiracy theorist rambling about little green men. This was a man speaking with the precision of an engineer, describing technical specifications, security procedures, and scientific principles with an unsettling level of consistency. He explained how these craft generated their own gravitational fields, bending space and time around them to achieve instantaneous movement across vast distances. He described element 115, a stable isotope that served as fuel for reactors no bigger than a basketball, yet capable of generating more power than entire nuclear power plants. He detailed the interior of these craft, noting that everything seemed designed for beings much smaller than humans, with low ceilings and tiny seats. Most remarkably, he described the propulsion system in terms that, while extraordinary, were grounded in actual physics. He spoke of gravity amplifiers, of space-time distortion, of matter-antimatter reactions with near-perfect efficiency. These weren't the ramblings of a science fiction fan. They were the technical observations of someone who claimed to have seen these technologies in operation. And then he did something that would either prove his credibility or expose him as a fraud. He took friends out into the desert to witness test flights of these craft. They positioned themselves on public land, overlooking the restricted area, and according to their testimony, they saw exactly what Lazar had described: silent, glowing objects moving in ways that defied everything we know about conventional aircraft. The objects would hover motionless, then dart at impossible angles, accelerating and changing direction with no visible means of propulsion. They moved like nothing earthly, performing maneuvers that would have been fatal to any human pilot if conventional physics applied. But here's where Bob Lazar's story takes a dark turn. On their third expedition to witness these test flights, they were caught. Military security forces appeared out of the darkness, detaining the group and confiscating their equipment. Lazar was brought in for questioning, confronted with transcripts of his monitored phone calls, and told in no uncertain terms that his involvement with the program was over. Faced with what he perceived as escalating threats, Lazar made a fateful decision. If they were going to silence him, he would speak first, loudly and publicly. He reached out to investigative journalist George Knapp at Las Vegas television station KLAS, and the rest, as they say, is history. When Lazar's story aired in November 1989, it sent shockwaves through the world. Here was a man, calm and articulate, claiming first-hand knowledge of the most closely guarded secrets in human history. He spoke of a shadow government program, of technology that could revolutionize our understanding of physics, and of evidence that we are not alone in the universe. The response was immediate and polarizing. UFO enthusiasts hailed him as a hero, the whistleblower who had finally pulled back the curtain on decades of government secrecy. Skeptics attacked his credibility, pointing to the lack of verifiable credentials and the extraordinary nature of his claims. Government officials, predictably, denied everything. But something strange happened in the years that followed. Some of the details Lazar had described began to be corroborated. The hand scanner he mentioned, dismissed as fantasy in 1989, was later confirmed to exist at military installations. Element 115, theoretical when he first mentioned it, was successfully synthesized by scientists in 2003, though only in unstable forms. More intriguingly, his descriptions of the craft's behavior began to align with official military encounters that would be revealed decades later. The Tic Tac UFO, observed by Navy pilots in 2004, exhibited the same impossible flight characteristics that Lazar had described: instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns at high speed, and movement that seemed to ignore the laws of inertia. Yet for every piece of seemingly corroborating evidence, skeptics found alternative explanations. The hand scanner wasn't alien technology, it was simply classified military equipment. Element 115 existed, but not in the stable form Lazar described. The UFO sightings could be explained by advanced, but entirely human technology. This is the paradox of Bob Lazar's story. It's simultaneously the most detailed and technically sophisticated UFO account ever recorded, and one of the most difficult to definitively prove or disprove. It's a story that has survived decades of scrutiny, launched thousands of investigations, and inspired countless others to come forward with their own accounts of government UFO programs. What makes Lazar's claims particularly intriguing is their consistency. Unlike many UFO stories that evolve and expand over time, Lazar's account has remained remarkably stable. The technical details he described in 1989 are the same ones he discusses today. The layout of the facility, the appearance of the craft, the nature of the propulsion system, all unchanged despite 30 years of questioning and investigation. This consistency is either the mark of a truth-teller with nothing to hide, or the discipline of a master fabricator who understood that changing details would undermine his credibility. The question is, which one is Bob Lazar? The man himself has never seemed to relish the spotlight his revelations brought him. He's given relatively few interviews over the years, often appearing reluctant and weary when discussing his experiences. He's never written a book, never gone on lecture tours, never tried to capitalize on his fame in the ways that many hoaxers do. Instead, he's lived a relatively quiet life, running a scientific supply company and avoiding the UFO community for the most part. When he does speak, it's often with a resignation that suggests he wishes he'd never said anything at all. This isn't the behavior of someone seeking attention or profit from a fabricated story. But it's also not definitive proof of truthfulness. Some of the most effective deception involves appearing reluctant to deceive. The question of Bob Lazar's credibility remains as murky today as it was in 1989, and that ambiguity is perhaps the most frustrating and fascinating aspect of his story. What we do know is that his revelations have had a profound impact on how we think about UFOs, government secrecy, and the possibility that we are not alone in the universe. Whether his claims are true or false, they've shaped public discourse, influenced government policy, and inspired a generation of researchers and investigators. The story of Bob Lazar is far from over. New evidence continues to emerge, new witnesses come forward, and new technologies allow us to examine his claims in ways that weren't possible in 1989. Each development adds another layer to a mystery that has captivated the world for over 3 decades. As we stand on the threshold of what many believe could be an era of unprecedented disclosure about UFOs and extraterrestrial visitation, the story of Bob Lazar takes on new significance. Was he the first whistleblower in a slow process of revelation that continues today? Or was he simply a man who told an extraordinary lie with extraordinary skill? The answer to that question may determine not just how we view one man's claims, but how we understand our place in the universe itself. Because if Bob Lazar was telling the truth, then everything we thought we knew about our reality, our technology, and our cosmic isolation is about to change forever. Looking at the Bob Lazar story, we've established the foundation of his extraordinary claims about working on alien technology at S4. Now we need to examine the most controversial and technical aspects of his account, the propulsion system itself, and the element that supposedly powered it. The heart of Lazar's story wasn't just that he had seen flying saucers, it was that he had worked on them, touched them, understood how they operated. According to Lazar, these weren't just mysterious lights in the sky or distant objects captured on grainy footage. These were engineered machines, sophisticated beyond anything human science had produced, yet comprehensible enough that he could reverse engineer their basic principles. The craft he worked on, which he nicknamed the Sport Model, was roughly 52 feet in diameter, sleek, seamless, and constructed from what appeared to be a single piece of metal with no visible joints, bolts, or welds. The surface was cold to the touch, like brushed aluminum, but somehow lighter than it should have been. When he first encountered it, sitting in its hangar carved into the Nevada mountainside, Lazar couldn't help but reach out and touch it. But it was what lay inside the craft that would forever change his understanding of physics and propulsion. The Sport Model contained 3 levels. The upper level housed what appeared to be navigation systems behind small, dark portholes. The middle level contained 3 small seats arranged around a central reactor, and the lower level held the gravity amplifiers themselves, three large pipe-like devices that could be positioned independently to direct the craft's movement. The reactor at the center of it all was no larger than a basketball, yet it supposedly generated more power than a nuclear power plant. It ran completely silent, produced no heat, and emitted no radiation. The fuel source was something that didn't officially exist on Earth's periodic table in 1989, element 115. When Lazar first mentioned element 115 during his television interviews, mainstream science dismissed it as fantasy. The periodic table, they argued, was well understood. Heavy elements beyond what had been synthesized in laboratories simply couldn't exist in stable forms. They would decay almost instantly, making them useless for any practical application. But Lazar insisted that the element 115 used in the alien reactor was different. It was stable, he claimed, with unique properties that allowed it to generate gravitational fields. When bombarded with protons in the reactor, it would transmute into element 116, releasing antimatter in the process. This antimatter would then react with gaseous matter to produce tremendous amounts of energy through what physicists call total annihilation, a reaction that converts 100% of matter into energy. The energy generated by this process powered the craft's electrical systems through thermionic conversion. But more importantly, the element 115 itself produced a gravitational field that extended beyond the nucleus of the atom. This field could be amplified and directed through waveguides, essentially pipes that channeled the gravitational waves like microwaves through a horn antenna. The three gravity amplifiers beneath the craft would focus these gravitational waves, creating what Lazar described as a distortion in space-time itself. The craft didn't push through the air like a conventional aircraft. Instead, it bent space around it, creating a gravitational gradient that it would essentially fall into over and over again, achieving what appeared to be instantaneous acceleration and impossible maneuvers. In the Omicron configuration, the craft would use a single gravity amplifier to hover, lifting off the ground silently, while the other two amplifiers remained inactive. For forward movement, it would tilt the remaining amplifiers forward, creating a distortion ahead of the craft that it would perpetually fall toward. This explained the erratic, wobbling motion often reported in UFO sightings. The craft was essentially surfing gravitational waves that varied slightly depending on the density of the Earth below. For space travel, the craft would switch to delta configuration, using all three amplifiers in unison. It would tilt up on its side and focus the three gravity generators to a single point, creating a more powerful distortion that could bend space-time dramatically enough to cover vast distances almost instantaneously. The implications were staggering. If such technology existed, it would revolutionize not just transportation, but our entire understanding of physics and energy. Fossil fuels would become obsolete overnight. Space travel would become as simple as driving to the grocery store. The energy crisis would be solved. The limitations that had confined humanity to Earth would disappear. But the technology came with its own mysteries and dangers. According to Lazar, the gravitational field generated by the craft would bend light itself. From certain angles, particularly from below, the craft would appear invisible as light curved around it. This wasn't active camouflage or stealth technology. It was a natural consequence of the gravitational distortion, similar to how light bends around massive objects in space. The field also created a kind of isolated environment within the craft. Anyone inside would be insulated from the effects of inertia because they would be moving within the gravitational bubble itself. There would be no sensation of acceleration, no G-forces, no physics-defying stress on the occupants during impossible maneuvers. Yet for all its advanced capabilities, the craft seemed designed for beings much smaller than humans. The ceilings were low, the seats tiny, clearly intended for occupants no more than 3 or 4 feet tall. Human test pilots could barely fit inside, and the controls seemed adapted for different physiology entirely. The reactor itself was elegant in its simplicity. Element 115 sat at the top of the device, while the bottom contained what resembled a miniature particle accelerator. Protons would be accelerated to high speeds and fired at the element 115, causing the transmutation that released antimatter. The antimatter would travel down a tuned tube to react with matter, producing the tremendous energy output. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the technology was how far beyond human capability it seemed to be. Lazar estimated it represented perhaps 100 to 200 years of advancement over human science. Not thousands of years, not millions, just enough to suggest that whoever built these craft had taken the same fundamental understanding of physics and pushed it to its logical conclusion. The element 115 itself raised profound questions. If it was stable in the form found in the reactor, where did it come from? Could it occur naturally somewhere else in the universe, on a planet with different stellar conditions? Or was it artificially created by a civilization that had mastered nuclear physics to a degree humans couldn't imagine? Lazar claimed that the facility had approximately 500 pounds of the element in storage. How it had been acquired, he wasn't told. Whether it came with the craft or had been provided separately remained a mystery. But the implications were clear. This wasn't just a single experimental device. This was technology that existed in quantity, suggesting an infrastructure and manufacturing capability that boggled the mind. The more Lazar learned about the propulsion system, the more questions arose. If such technology existed, why keep it secret? The benefits to humanity would be immeasurable. Clean, unlimited energy, instantaneous transportation, the ability to explore the cosmos without the constraints of conventional physics. But the answer, according to Lazar, lay in the technology's dual nature. The same system that could power cities and transport people to distant stars could also be weaponized. A craft capable of instantaneous travel could deliver weapons anywhere on Earth without warning. The gravitational manipulation itself could potentially be used as a weapon, creating distortions that could devastate entire regions. The secrecy, then, wasn't just about hiding the existence of extraterrestrial technology. It was about controlling something that could fundamentally alter the balance of power on Earth. In the wrong hands, such technology could be catastrophic. In the right hands, it could transform civilization itself. Yet even as Lazar worked to understand the technology, he remained humbled by its complexity. This wasn't just a more advanced version of human engineering. It represented a completely different approach to physics, one that treated gravity not as an immutable force, but as something that could be manipulated and directed like electricity or magnetism. The psychological impact of working with such technology was profound. Every day, Lazar confronted evidence that humanity's understanding of the universe was incomplete. The physics textbooks that had guided his education suddenly seemed primitive. The limitations that humans accepted as fundamental laws of nature were revealed to be merely technological hurdles that could be overcome with sufficient understanding. But understanding and reproducing were two different things. Even if Lazar and his colleagues could comprehend how the technology worked, replicating it with Earth materials and human manufacturing techniques remained a monumental challenge. The project at S4 wasn't just about reverse engineering alien technology, it was about bridging the gap between what was possible and what humans could actually achieve. The element 115 remained the key stumbling block. Without a stable source of the exotic matter, the entire propulsion system was useless. Human particle accelerators could create atoms of element 115, but they decayed in milliseconds. The stable isotope that powered the alien craft remained beyond human capability to produce. This limitation meant that the technology at S4 was essentially a museum piece, fascinating to study, impossible to replicate. The craft could be flown, but only carefully, and only for short distances. Taking it beyond Earth's atmosphere was considered too risky. The technology represented potential rather than practical application. For Lazar, this was perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the entire project. He was working with technology that could solve humanity's greatest challenges, yet it remained tantalizingly out of reach. The knowledge was there, the understanding was growing, but the practical application remained locked away by the limitations of human science and the exotic materials required to make it work. As he delved deeper into the technology, Lazar began to understand that he wasn't just reverse engineering a machine. He was trying to comprehend an entirely different approach to physics and engineering. The beings who had created this technology didn't just have better materials or more advanced manufacturing techniques. They had developed a fundamentally different understanding of how the universe worked. Human science treated gravity as a force to be overcome. The builders of the sport model had learned to harness it as a tool. Human energy production relied on chemical reactions or nuclear processes that converted small amounts of matter into energy. The alien technology achieved total matter-to-energy conversion through controlled antimatter reactions. The implications extended far beyond propulsion. If gravity could be manipulated, it could be used for energy generation, manufacturing, even terraforming. If antimatter could be safely contained and controlled, it could power civilizations for millennia. The technology represented not just a better way to travel, but a completely different approach to existence itself. Yet for all its sophistication, the technology also revealed limitations. The craft was small, with minimal storage space, and no apparent provisions for long-term habitation. They seemed designed for specific purposes rather than general exploration. This suggested that even the advanced civilization that created them faced constraints and had to make design choices based on their particular needs and circumstances. The question that haunted Lazar was whether humanity would ever be able to bridge the gap between understanding and application. The technology existed, it could be studied and partially comprehended, but reproducing it remained an enormous challenge. Even if every detail of the propulsion system could be mapped and understood, creating the exotic materials and precision manufacturing required to build a working replica seemed beyond human capability. This technological gap represented more than just an engineering challenge. It was a reminder of humanity's place in the universe. If such technology existed, if it had been created by beings from elsewhere, then humans were not the pinnacle of intelligence and achievement they sometimes imagined themselves to be. They were students, struggling to understand lessons written by teachers who had moved far beyond the basics. The humbling nature of this realization was perhaps as significant as the technology itself. For Lazar, working at S4 meant confronting the possibility that everything he thought he knew about physics, about humanity's capabilities, about our place in the cosmos, was incomplete. The technology represented not just advanced engineering, but a window into a larger universe filled with possibilities that human science had barely begun to imagine. As his time at S4 progressed, Lazar found himself caught between wonder and frustration. The technology was remarkable, elegant, and revolutionary, but it was also a reminder of how much humanity still had to learn and how far the species had to go before it could truly claim to understand the universe it inhabited. The Element 115 reactor continued to fascinate him. Here was a device smaller than a basketball that could generate more power than a nuclear power plant, yet it operated silently, produced no waste, and required no cooling systems. The efficiency was beyond anything human technology had achieved. It represented a level of engineering sophistication that made human power generation seem primitive by comparison. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the technology was its apparent age. The craft showed no signs of wear or deterioration. The materials seemed as fresh as if they had been manufactured yesterday, yet they could have been thousands of years old. This suggested not just advanced technology, but materials science that had solved problems of durability and maintenance that continued to challenge human engineers. The implications for human civilization were staggering. If such technology could be understood and replicated, it would transform every aspect of human existence. Energy would become essentially free and unlimited. Transportation would become instantaneous. The resources of the solar system would become accessible. The barriers that had confined humanity to Earth would disappear. Yet the technology also raised troubling questions about control and power. Who would have access to such capabilities? How would they be regulated? What would prevent their misuse? The same technology that could liberate humanity from the constraints of physics could also be used to control or destroy. For Lazar, these questions remained largely theoretical. His job was to understand the technology, not to determine how it should be used, but the implications were impossible to ignore. He was working with something that could fundamentally alter the trajectory of human civilization, yet it remained locked away in a secret facility, studied by a handful of cleared personnel, hidden from the very people who might benefit most from its application. The secrecy that surrounded the project began to weigh on him. Here was technology that could solve humanity's greatest challenges: energy, transportation, space exploration, yet it remained classified, studied in isolation, kept from the scientific community that might be able to advance its understanding and application. The contradiction between the technology's potential and its secrecy would eventually drive Lazar to make the decision that would change his life forever. But for now, he remained focused on the immediate challenge of understanding how the impossible had been made possible, and whether humanity would ever be capable of making the leap from observation to application. The Element 115 reactor represented more than just advanced technology. It was a glimpse into a future where the fundamental limitations that had shaped human civilization no longer applied. Whether that future would ever be accessible to humanity remained an open question, but the technology itself stood as proof that such possibilities existed, waiting to be discovered, understood, and perhaps one day achieved. Bob Lazar stood in the Nevada desert, watching the sun set over the mountains that concealed what he claimed was the most important secret in human history. Years had passed since his first public revelation, but the questions surrounding his story had only deepened. The craft he described, the technology he witnessed, and the implications of what it all meant for humanity's future remained as mysterious as ever. In the decades following his initial interviews, the world had begun to catch up with some of Lazar's claims. Element 115, once purely theoretical, had been synthesized in laboratories, though in highly unstable forms that decayed within milliseconds. The stable isotope Lazar described remained elusive, existing only in his testimony and the physics equations that suggested such stability might be possible under the right conditions. The gravity amplifiers he detailed represented technology that was centuries ahead of human capability. These devices, according to Lazar, could manipulate gravitational fields in ways that modern physics considered nearly impossible. The implications were staggering. If such technology existed, it would revolutionize not just transportation, but energy production, space exploration, and our fundamental understanding of the universe itself. What made Lazar's claims particularly compelling was their consistency. Through decades of interviews, polygraph tests, and public scrutiny, his account never wavered. He described the same reactor, the same propulsion system, the same facility layout. He spoke with the precision of someone who had worked intimately with technology that defied conventional understanding. The craft he called the sport model haunted his descriptions. 52 feet in diameter, seamless construction, powered by a reactor no bigger than a basketball that could generate more energy than a nuclear power plant. The vehicle could manipulate space-time itself, creating distortions that allowed it to move not by flying, but by falling through warped space. It was elegant in its impossibility, beautiful in its implications, But the technology raised uncomfortable questions about humanity's place in the cosmos. If such craft existed, where did they come from? The briefings Lazar claimed to have read suggested the Zeta Reticuli star system, over 30 light-years away. The beings who allegedly created these vehicles were described as small, grey, with large heads, and eyes adapted to their distant world. They had supposedly been visiting Earth for millennia, observing, perhaps guiding, certainly present. The psychological weight of such knowledge was immense. Lazar often spoke of the ominous feeling he experienced when first entering one of the craft. It wasn't excitement or wonder, but a profound sense of being somewhere he shouldn't be, touching something beyond human comprehension. The technology was so advanced that understanding it felt like trying to explain quantum mechanics to a medieval peasant. The secrecy surrounding the program was absolute. Lazar described compartmentalized operations where scientists worked on individual components without understanding the whole. The facility at S4, carved into the Nevada mountainside, was hidden from satellites and protected by layers of security, both physical and psychological. Those who worked there were monitored constantly, their communications intercepted, their lives scrutinized. When Lazar finally chose to speak publicly, he did so knowing the consequences. His background was systematically erased, his credentials questioned, his character attacked. The campaign to discredit him was thorough and relentless, yet he persisted, driven by a belief that humanity deserved to know the truth about what its government had discovered. The technology he described had profound implications beyond mere transportation. Anti-gravity propulsion could solve energy crises, revolutionize manufacturing, and open the solar system to human exploration. But it also represented a paradigm shift so fundamental that it threatened existing power structures, economic systems, and humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Lazar's story intersected with broader questions about government secrecy and the public's right to know. If such technology existed, who controlled it? How long had it been hidden? What other secrets lay buried in classified facilities around the world? The implications extended far beyond flying saucers to touch on the very nature of truth, power, and humanity's future. The scientific community remained divided. Some dismissed Lazar as a fraud or fantasist, pointing to inconsistencies in his background and the impossibility of his claims. Others found his technical descriptions compelling, noting that many details aligned with theoretical physics concepts that were barely understood when he first spoke publicly. The recent acknowledgement by military officials that unidentified aerial phenomena existed and displayed capabilities beyond current technology lent new credibility to claims once dismissed as science fiction. The Pentagon's release of videos showing objects performing impossible maneuvers echoed the descriptions Lazar had provided decades earlier. Yet questions remained. If the technology was real, why hadn't it been developed further? Why did the craft disappear from public view? Were they hidden more deeply, or had they been returned to their creators? The answers seemed as distant as the stars themselves. For Lazar, the burden of his knowledge never lessened. He carried the weight of having glimpsed humanity's potential future while being unable to prove its existence. He had touched technology that could transform civilization, but watched as it remained locked away, its benefits denied to a world that desperately needed them. The story raised profound questions about contact with non-human intelligence. If beings from another star system had visited Earth, what were their intentions? The craft suggested a level of technological sophistication that made humanity seem primitive by comparison. Yet the visitors, if they existed, had chosen to remain hidden, working through intermediaries, or perhaps simply observing from the shadows. The implications for human evolution were staggering. If advanced beings had been present throughout human history, had they influenced our development? The leap from primitive hunter-gatherers to modern civilization seemed impossibly rapid from a cosmic perspective. Perhaps humanity had received help, guidance, or direct intervention from intelligences far more advanced than our own. As the sun disappeared behind the Nevada mountains, Lazar reflected on the path that had brought him from a curious physicist to the center of one of history's most controversial claims. The technology he described remained as relevant as ever, perhaps more so as humanity faced challenges that seemed to require solutions beyond current capabilities. The story of S4 and the craft hidden within its mountain chambers represented more than just advanced technology. It symbolized humanity's eternal quest to understand its place in the cosmos, to reach beyond the boundaries of the known, and to imagine possibilities that transcended current limitations. Whether the technology existed or not, the questions it raised about human potential and our relationship with the universe would endure long after the last witness had spoken. In the growing darkness of the Nevada desert, under stars that might harbor civilizations unimaginably more advanced than our own, the mystery of Bob Lazar's claims continued to challenge our understanding of what was possible, what was hidden, and what might yet be discovered in the vast expanse of space and time that surrounded our small, questioning world. Now, let's delve deeper into the scientific principles underlying these incredible claims. Bob Lazar's detailed descriptions of the propulsion systems he allegedly worked on at S4 challenge our fundamental understanding of physics. The technology he described operates on principles that remain largely theoretical in our current scientific framework, yet the precision with which he explained these concepts has intrigued researchers for decades. The reactor system that Lazar claimed to have studied was supposedly no larger than a basketball, yet it generated more power than a conventional nuclear power plant. This compact energy source operated on what he described as a matter-antimatter reaction, utilizing element 115 as its fuel source. When this element was bombarded with protons in what resembled a miniature particle accelerator, it allegedly produced antimatter particles that would then annihilate with normal matter, creating enormous amounts of energy in the process. This energy conversion system, according to Lazar, achieved near-perfect efficiency. Unlike conventional nuclear reactions that convert only a small percentage of matter into energy, this alien technology supposedly achieved almost complete matter-to-energy conversion. The implications of such a system would be staggering. It would represent a quantum leap beyond our current understanding of energy production, and could theoretically provide unlimited clean energy. But the energy production was only one aspect of the technology. The reactor also generated what Lazar termed gravitational waves, which were then amplified and directed through a system of waveguides similar to those used in microwave technology. These amplified gravitational fields could supposedly be manipulated to create propulsion effects that defied conventional physics. The craft's propulsion operated on the principle of space-time distortion. Rather than pushing against the surrounding medium like conventional aircraft, the vehicle created a gravitational field that essentially bent the fabric of space-time around it. This allowed the craft to fall through distorted space, achieving instantaneous acceleration without the occupants experiencing inertial effects. Lazar described two operational modes for the craft. In the Omicron configuration, the vehicle used only one of its 3 gravity amplifiers to hover and perform low-altitude maneuvers. This mode was inherently unstable because the craft had to constantly adjust to variations in Earth's gravitational field. In the Delta configuration, all 3 amplifiers worked in unison, allowing the craft to tilt on its side and focus the gravitational distortion in a specific direction for high-speed travel. The physics behind these claims touches on some of the most advanced theories in modern science. Einstein's general relativity describes gravity not as a force, but as a curvature in space-time caused by mass and energy. If a technology could artificially create and manipulate this curvature, it would theoretically be possible to achieve the effects Lazar described. However, the energy requirements for such manipulation would be enormous by conventional standards. Creating significant gravitational effects typically requires massive amounts of matter, like planets or stars. The idea that a basketball-sized reactor could generate such fields seems impossible with our current understanding of physics. Yet Lazar's descriptions align remarkably well with certain theoretical concepts in advanced physics. The Alcubierre drive, proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre in 1994, describes a theoretical method of faster-than-light travel that involves contracting space in front of a spacecraft and expanding it behind. This concept bears striking similarities to Lazar's descriptions of how the alien craft operated. The element 115 aspect of Lazar's account has proven particularly intriguing. When he first made his claims in 1989, element 115 did not exist in any known form. The periodic table ended at element 109, and element 115 was purely theoretical. Scientists had predicted that such heavy elements might exist in what they called the island of stability, a region where certain isotopes of super-heavy elements might be stable enough to exist for extended periods. In 2003, Russian scientists at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research successfully synthesized element 115 by bombarding americium with calcium ions. The newly created element, later named moscovium, existed for only milliseconds before decaying. This synthesis was later confirmed by scientists at the GSI Helmholtz Center for Heavy Ion Research in Germany and at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California. The fact that element 115 was eventually discovered and synthesized has been cited by supporters as validation of Lazar's claims. However, skeptics point out that the synthesized element was highly unstable and bore no resemblance to the stable isotope that Lazar described. The version he claimed to have worked with was supposedly stable, non-radioactive, and possessed unique gravitational properties that are not observed in the synthesized moscovium. Lazar explained that the stable isotope of element 115 had a unique atomic structure that allowed its gravitational field to extend beyond the atom's normal boundaries. This extended field could then be amplified and manipulated by the craft's propulsion system. The concept relates to theories about how gravity operates at the quantum level, though our current understanding of quantum gravity remains incomplete. The waveguide system that Lazar described for directing the gravitational fields is reminiscent of how electromagnetic waves are channeled in microwave technology. If gravitational waves could be manipulated in a similar manner, it would represent a revolutionary breakthrough in our understanding of fundamental forces. The detection of gravitational waves by the LIGO Observatory in 2015 confirmed that these ripples in space-time do exist, though our ability to generate and control them remains far beyond current technology. The craft's construction, as described by Lazar, seemed to defy conventional manufacturing techniques. The hull appeared to be seamlessly constructed, with no visible joints, seams, or fasteners. The material felt metallic, but had properties unlike any known alloy. The interior featured chairs and controls, scaled for beings much smaller than humans, suggesting the original operators were perhaps 3 to 4 feet tall. The control systems were allegedly operated through some form of neural interface, responding to the pilot's thoughts and intentions rather than physical manipulation. This concept has become less far-fetched as our understanding of brain-computer interfaces has advanced. Modern researchers have developed systems that can translate neural signals into computer commands, though the sophistication Lazar described would require technology far beyond our current capabilities. The craft's ability to become nearly invisible was another remarkable feature. Lazar explained that the gravitational fields generated by the propulsion system could bend light around the vehicle, creating a cloaking effect. This phenomenon is similar to how massive objects like stars can bend light through gravitational lensing, though achieving the same effect with an artificial gravitational field would require precise control over space-time curvature. The implications of such technology extend far beyond transportation. If humanity could master gravitational manipulation, it would revolutionize virtually every aspect of our technological civilization. Energy production would become virtually unlimited and clean. Space travel would be transformed from a dangerous, time-consuming endeavor to routine transportation. The fundamental physics underlying such technology would open new realms of scientific understanding. However, the technological gap between our current capabilities and the systems Lazar described remains vast. Even if his account is accurate, reverse engineering such advanced technology would likely require scientific breakthroughs that might take centuries to achieve. The compartmentalized nature of the research program, as Lazar described it, would have made such breakthroughs even more difficult to attain. The secrecy surrounding the project, if it existed, would have been driven by more than just national security concerns. The introduction of such revolutionary technology could destabilize global economic and political systems. Energy markets would be rendered obsolete overnight. Military balances of power would shift dramatically. The societal implications would be as profound as the technological ones. Despite the extraordinary nature of his claims, Lazar's technical descriptions have remained remarkably consistent over the decades. He has not embellished or expanded upon his original account, which lends a certain credibility to his testimony. The level of technical detail he provided, particularly regarding theoretical physics concepts that were not widely known in 1989, suggests either genuine experience with advanced technology or an unusually sophisticated understanding of cutting-edge physics. The story of Bob Lazar continues to captivate those interested in the possibility of extraterrestrial visitation and advanced technology. Whether his account represents genuine disclosure of a classified program or an elaborate fiction, it has undeniably influenced public perception of UFO phenomena and sparked serious scientific discussions about the theoretical possibilities of advanced propulsion systems. As our understanding of physics continues to evolve, and as we develop new technologies that once seemed impossible, the line between science fiction and scientific possibility continues to blur. The concepts Lazar described may seem fantastical today, but they touch on legitimate areas of scientific inquiry that could lead to revolutionary breakthroughs in the future. The story of Bob Lazar doesn't end with his departure from S4 or his decision to speak publicly about his experiences. In many ways, the most fascinating chapter begins with what happened after he stepped into the light, revealing claims that would forever change the conversation about extraterrestrial technology and government secrecy. When Lazar first appeared on Las Vegas television in 1989, he opened a door that could never be closed. His detailed descriptions of anti-gravity propulsion systems, stable element 115, and craft capable of bending space-time itself represented more than just testimony. They represented a challenge to our understanding of physics, technology, and humanity's place in the universe. But here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. Over the decades that followed, rather than being definitively debunked, many of Lazar's claims began to find unexpected support. The element 115 that he described as fuel for these otherworldly machines was synthesized by scientists in 2003, confirming its existence on the periodic table. The hand scanners he mentioned, once dismissed as science fiction, were later photographed in actual military installations. The gravitational wave detection systems he described decades before mainstream science achieved similar breakthroughs. These weren't wild guesses or lucky predictions. They were specific, technical details that suggested intimate knowledge of advanced systems that officially didn't exist. When someone describes technology that won't be publicly acknowledged for decades, it raises profound questions about the source of that knowledge. The propulsion system Lazar described operates on principles that challenge our current understanding of physics. According to his account, the craft generates its own gravitational field using 3 gravity amplifiers positioned in a triangular configuration beneath the vehicle. This field doesn't push or pull the craft through space in the traditional sense. Instead, It creates a distortion in space-time itself, allowing the vehicle to effectively fall through warped space. Think about the implications of this technology. If accurate, it would mean that our understanding of gravity, space, and time is fundamentally incomplete. We've been thinking of space travel in terms of rockets and fuel, thrust and momentum, when the real breakthrough might involve manipulating the very fabric of reality itself. The energy source that powers this system is equally revolutionary. Lazar described a reactor smaller than a basketball that could generate more power than a nuclear power plant, using stable element 115 as fuel. This isn't just an incremental improvement over existing technology. It's a paradigm shift that would render our current energy infrastructure obsolete overnight. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Lazar's account isn't the technology itself, but the implications of reverse engineering. If his story is true, it means that humanity has been in possession of technology that could solve our energy crisis, revolutionize transportation, and unlock the secrets of interstellar travel. Yet this knowledge has remained locked away, accessible only to a select few, working in compartmentalized secrecy. The question isn't just whether Lazar's claims are true. The question is why such technology would be kept secret. Is it because the implications are too destabilizing for society? Because the military applications are too dangerous? Or because the revelation would fundamentally challenge our understanding of human history and our place in the cosmos? Consider the broader context of what Lazar described. He wasn't just talking about advanced machines. He was describing evidence of non-human intelligence, technology that operates on principles we don't understand, and a level of secrecy that suggests knowledge of contact with otherworldly civilizations. The craft he worked on, which he nicknamed the sport model, wasn't designed for human occupants. The ceilings were too low, the seats too small, the entire architecture suggesting beings of smaller stature. This detail, often overlooked in discussions of Lazar's claims, provides a haunting reminder that if his story is true, we are not dealing with human technology at all. The briefings he described included references to beings from the Zeta Reticuli star system, over 30 light-years away. While this information came from documents rather than direct observation, it raises questions about the scope of what might be known about extraterrestrial contact. If such beings exist, if they've traveled to Earth, if their technology is being studied in secret facilities, then the implications extend far beyond propulsion systems and energy sources. We're talking about a fundamental revision of human history, our understanding of life in the universe, and our technological potential. The anti-gravity systems Lazar described wouldn't just change how we travel. They would change how we think about physics, energy, and the possibilities of human civilization. The secrecy surrounding these alleged programs isn't just about protecting national security. It's about protecting a worldview, a set of assumptions about reality that might crumble if the truth were revealed. If advanced non-human technology exists, if it's being studied and potentially replicated, then everything we think we know about human achievement and technological progress comes into question. Lazar's account suggests that we're living in a world where the most important scientific discoveries of our time are hidden from public view. While we debate climate change and energy policy, the solutions might already exist in underground facilities, locked away from the very people who could benefit from them. The technology he described could provide clean, virtually unlimited energy. It could enable space travel that would make interstellar exploration feasible. It could fundamentally transform human civilization in ways we can barely imagine. Yet according to his account, it remains classified, studied in secret, available only to those with the highest security clearances. This isn't just about flying saucers or alien contact. It's about the suppression of knowledge that could change the world. It's about the possibility that we're living in a civilization that has access to revolutionary technology, but lacks the wisdom or courage to use it for the benefit of humanity. The gravity amplifiers Lazar described operate by manipulating one of the fundamental forces of the universe. If such technology exists, it represents a level of scientific understanding that would make our current physics textbooks obsolete. We would need to completely revise our understanding of how the universe works, how energy can be generated and manipulated, and what's possible for a technological civilization. But the most profound implication of Lazar's story isn't technological, it's philosophical. If his account is accurate, it means that we are not alone in the universe, that we have been visited by beings from other worlds, and that our government has been aware of this fact for decades. The isolation we feel as a species, the sense that we're alone in a vast and empty cosmos, would be revealed as an illusion. The technology Lazar described suggests civilizations that have mastered forces we barely understand. The ability to manipulate gravity, to bend space-time, to generate enormous amounts of energy from exotic matter represents a level of advancement that puts our own technological achievements in perspective. We might think of ourselves as a sophisticated species, but compared to the beings who allegedly built these craft, we're still in the early stages of technological development. Yet within that humbling realization lies extraordinary hope. If such technology exists, if it can be understood and replicated, then the future of human civilization is far brighter than we might have imagined. The problems that seem insurmountable today, from energy scarcity to environmental destruction to the limitations of space travel, might have solutions that we haven't even begun to explore. The story of Bob Lazar isn't just about one man's claims or the government's response to them. It's about the possibility that we're living at a moment in history when the most profound discoveries are being made in secret, when the future of human civilization is being determined by a small group of individuals working in facilities that officially don't exist. Whether Lazar's account is true or false, it forces us to confront fundamental questions about knowledge, secrecy, and the right of humanity to understand its place in the universe. In a democratic society, should such momentous discoveries be kept secret? Do we have the right to know if we're not alone? Should technology that could transform civilization be accessible to all or controlled by a few? The anti-gravity propulsion system Lazar described represents more than just a new form of transportation. It represents a new understanding of reality itself, a recognition that the universe operates according to principles we've barely begun to grasp. If such technology exists, studying it openly could accelerate human understanding of physics by centuries. The stable element 115 that allegedly powers these systems could revolutionize energy production, providing clean power without the environmental costs of fossil fuels or the risks of nuclear fission. If such materials exist, if they can be synthesized or obtained, they could be the key to solving humanity's energy crisis. But beyond the practical applications lies something even more profound. The technology Lazar described suggests that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we've imagined. Space and time aren't fixed constants, but malleable forces that can be shaped and manipulated. Gravity isn't just something that pulls objects together, but a fundamental aspect of reality that can be harnessed and controlled. These aren't just scientific discoveries. They're revelations about the nature of existence itself, about the hidden potentials of the universe we inhabit. If Lazar's account is accurate, then we're living in a reality where the impossible is possible, where the boundaries we thought were absolute are actually just limitations of our current understanding. The implications extend far beyond technology and science. If advanced beings from other worlds have visited Earth, if they've shared their knowledge with select human representatives, then the story of human civilization is far more complex than we've been told. We might not be the isolated species we think we are, but part of a larger galactic community, connected to civilizations that span the stars. The secrecy surrounding these alleged programs isn't just about protecting military advantages or preventing panic. It's about protecting a version of reality that might be fundamentally incomplete. If the truth about extraterrestrial contact and advanced technology were revealed, it would force us to reconsider everything we think we know about human history, scientific progress, and our place in the cosmos. Bob Lazar's story, whether true or false, has already changed the conversation about these possibilities. It's forced us to consider questions we might otherwise dismiss, to imagine possibilities we might otherwise ignore. In doing so, it's opened our minds to the potential that lies hidden in the universe around us, waiting to be discovered, understood, and shared with all of humanity. The technology he described represents more than just advanced engineering. It represents hope for a future where the limitations that constrain us today are revealed to be temporary obstacles, where the problems that seem insurmountable are solved by understanding forces we haven't yet learned to harness. Whether those forces are locked away in secret facilities or waiting to be discovered in laboratories around the world, the possibility that they exist should inspire us to keep searching, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Because if Bob Lazar's story teaches us anything, it's that the universe is far more mysterious and magnificent than we've ever dared to imagine. The physics behind Bob Lazar's extraordinary claims deserves careful examination, because if true, it would represent technology centuries ahead of our current understanding. According to Lazar, the craft he worked on operated on principles that mainstream science considers impossible, yet his descriptions remain remarkably consistent decades later. At the heart of Lazar's account lies element 115, a material he claimed was stable in its extraterrestrial form and capable of generating its own gravitational field. When Lazar first described this element in 1989, it didn't exist on Earth's periodic table. Scientists had theorized about an island of stability where super-heavy elements might remain intact, but element 115 was purely hypothetical. The reactor system Lazar described was elegantly simple yet revolutionary. Element 115 would be bombarded with protons in a small particle accelerator, transmuting it into element 116. This process allegedly released antimatter particles that, when combined with matter, created a 100% efficient energy conversion. Unlike our nuclear reactors that achieve only 8% efficiency, this system supposedly produced enormous power with virtually no waste heat. But the reactor's energy output was just the beginning. Lazar claimed that element 115 possessed a unique property where its gravitational field extended beyond the atom's nucleus. This field could be amplified and directed through waveguides, similar to how microwaves travel through tubes, eventually reaching 3 gravity amplifiers positioned in a triangular formation beneath the craft. These amplifiers could manipulate gravitational waves, creating what Lazar called a distortion field around the vehicle. Instead of conventional propulsion pushing against air or exhaust, the craft would bend space-time itself. The ship wouldn't fly through space in the traditional sense, but would fall into distorted space ahead of it, allowing for instantaneous acceleration and direction changes without the occupants experiencing inertia. The implications of such technology stretch far beyond transportation. If gravity could be artificially generated and controlled, it would revolutionize energy production, manufacturing, and our understanding of physics itself. Lazar described how the gravitational field could bend light around the craft, creating a form of invisibility where observers might see the sky above the vehicle instead of the craft itself. What makes Lazar's physics particularly intriguing is how certain aspects have gained credibility over time. In 2003, scientists successfully synthesized element 115, though only in unstable forms that decayed within milliseconds. While this doesn't validate Lazar's claims about stable isotopes, it demonstrates that his predictions weren't entirely fantastical. The concept of gravitational lensing, which Lazar described as bending light around the craft, is now well established in astronomy. We observe this phenomenon when massive objects like galaxies bend light from distant stars. Similarly, the relationship between gravity, space, and time that Lazar referenced aligns with Einstein's general relativity, though manipulating these forces artificially remains beyond our capabilities. Lazar's description of the craft's flight characteristics also parallels many modern UFO encounters. The silent movement, instantaneous acceleration, and ability to make 90-degree turns at high speed match reports from military pilots and radar operators. The Pentagon's recent acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena displaying these exact behaviors has renewed interest in Lazar's technical explanations. The reactor's small size relative to its power output represents another fascinating aspect of Lazar's claims. He described a basketball-sized device generating more energy than a nuclear power plant, with no cooling systems or radiation shielding. Such efficiency would violate our understanding of thermodynamics, yet Lazar insisted the system operated without generating heat. Perhaps most remarkably, Lazar claimed the technology could manipulate time itself. Because gravity affects the passage of time, a craft operating within its own gravitational field would experience temporal dilation. This means the occupants might experience minutes while hours passed in the outside world, effectively allowing for faster-than-light travel without violating relativity. The propulsion system's operational modes fascinated Lazar. In what he called Omicron configuration, the craft would use a single gravity amplifier to hover, lifting off silently and remaining motionless in the air. For forward movement, it would switch to delta configuration, using all three amplifiers to create a gravitational slope that the craft would perpetually fall down. This explains the erratic flight patterns often associated with UFO sightings. At low speeds, the craft would appear unstable because it was constantly adjusting to gravitational variations in Earth's field. Different mineral densities and geological features would cause the vehicle to bob and weave as it navigated these gravitational inconsistencies. For interstellar travel, the craft would tilt vertically and focus all three gravity amplifiers toward a single point, creating an intense distortion field. This configuration would allow the vehicle to traverse vast distances by folding space-time rather than traveling through it linearly. The journey from one star system to another might take only minutes from the crew's perspective. Lazar's technical knowledge extended beyond the propulsion system to the craft's construction. He described seamless metallic surfaces that appeared to be injection molded from a single piece, with no visible joints, rivets, or fasteners. The material felt cold to the touch, but seemed almost organic in its smoothness, suggesting manufacturing techniques far beyond human capabilities. The interior design reflected the technology's advanced nature. Controls were minimal, with much of the craft's operation apparently mental rather than manual. Lazar claimed that only certain individuals with specific neurological patterns could pilot the vehicles, suggesting a bio-neural interface that responded to thought rather than physical manipulation. Even the craft's power distribution system defied conventional understanding. Instead of wires or cables, energy flowed through the vehicle's structure itself, with the hull apparently serving as both conductor and shielding. This seamless integration of power, propulsion, and structure represented a level of engineering sophistication that human technology couldn't approach. The environmental implications of such technology would be staggering. Gravitational propulsion would produce no emissions, no noise, and no fuel consumption in the traditional sense. If humanity could master these principles, it would instantly solve our energy crisis and revolutionize transportation while eliminating environmental damage from fossil fuels. Yet Lazar acknowledged the technology's weapon potential. A device capable of generating intense gravitational fields could theoretically be used to devastating effect. This dual nature of the technology might explain the extreme secrecy surrounding the program and the government's reluctance to acknowledge its existence. The physics Lazar described challenges our fundamental assumptions about reality. If matter and energy can be converted with perfect efficiency, if gravity can be artificially generated, and if space-time can be manipulated at will, then our current scientific paradigm represents only the earliest stages of true understanding. Whether Bob Lazar's claims are accurate remains hotly debated, but the physics he described continues to inspire researchers and theorists. His vision of controlled gravity and space-time manipulation represents humanity's next great leap forward, a technology that could unite our species and carry us to the stars. The consistency of his technical descriptions across decades of interviews suggests either an extraordinary imagination or genuine knowledge of revolutionary physics. As our understanding of quantum mechanics, gravity, and space-time continues to evolve, perhaps we'll eventually discover that the impossible technology Lazar described was simply ahead of its time, waiting for human science to catch up to extraterrestrial reality. The desert air shimmers with heat as we delve deeper into the most extraordinary aspect of Bob Lazar's account. The technology he described wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary, a complete paradigm shift that would render everything we know about physics obsolete overnight. At the heart of this alien craft lay a reactor no bigger than a basketball. Yet according to Lazar, this small device generated more power than an entire nuclear power plant. The fuel was something that officially didn't exist on Earth, element 115, a stable isotope that defied our understanding of the periodic table. But here's where the story becomes truly mind-bending. Lazar claimed this wasn't just about propulsion. The technology manipulated gravity itself. The craft didn't fly through space, it warped space around it. Imagine folding a piece of paper so two distant points touch. That's essentially what these vehicles could do with the fabric of space-time itself. The implications were staggering. If true, this technology could solve humanity's energy crisis overnight. No more fossil fuels, no more pollution, unlimited clean energy from a reactor the size of a basketball. But more than that, it would fundamentally alter our understanding of reality itself. Lazar described watching test flights where the craft would hover silently, then accelerate at impossible angles without any visible means of propulsion. No exhaust, no sound, just a faint electrical discharge that made the air around it glow. The craft moved like it was falling through distorted space, always chasing a gravitational wave that it created ahead of itself. The physics behind it challenged everything we thought we knew. According to Lazar, the element 115 reactor produced antimatter when bombarded with protons. This antimatter, when combined with matter, released 100% of its energy, far more efficient than any nuclear reaction we'd ever achieved. But the real breakthrough was the gravitational field generation. The element 115 apparently had a unique property where its gravitational field extended beyond the atom itself. This field could be amplified, focused, and directed through waveguides throughout the craft. 3 gravity amplifiers positioned in a triangle beneath the vehicle could create a controlled distortion in space-time. The beauty of the system was its elegance. The craft could operate in 2 modes. In Omicron configuration, using 1 gravity amplifier, it could hover and maneuver at low speeds. But for interstellar travel, it would switch to Delta configuration, tilting up on its side and focusing all 3 amplifiers to create a massive space-time distortion. In this mode, the craft wasn't traveling through space in the conventional sense. It was compressing space in front of it and expanding space behind it. The vehicle would literally fall through the distorted space-time, covering vast distances almost instantaneously. Time itself would slow down inside the craft's gravitational field, creating a kind of temporal bubble that protected the occupants from the extreme forces involved. What made this technology even more remarkable was its apparent safety. Despite generating enormous amounts of energy, the reactor ran cool. No radiation, no waste products, just clean, efficient power that seemed to violate the laws of thermodynamics. The whole system was so advanced that Lazar admitted he barely understood how it worked. He described it as being like giving a motorcycle to someone from the 1800s. You could take it apart, examine every component, but without understanding internal combustion engines, electrical systems, and metallurgy, you'd never be able to replicate it. The technology was perhaps only a few hundred years ahead of us, but it was based on principles we hadn't discovered yet. The craft's construction was equally mysterious. No visible seams, bolts, or joints. Everything appeared to be molded from a single piece of material with a brushed metallic finish. The interior was scaled for beings much smaller than humans, perhaps 3.5 to 4 feet tall. The seats were tiny, the ceilings low, and the controls seemed to interface directly with the pilot's nervous system. But what truly captivated Lazar was the potential this technology represented. If humanity could master gravity manipulation, we could revolutionize transportation, energy production, and space exploration. We could travel to the stars not in generations, but in hours. We could eliminate scarcity and transform civilization itself. Yet this incredible knowledge remained locked away in a classified facility, studied by a handful of scientists working in isolation. The compartmentalization that surrounded the project meant that no one person understood the full scope of what they were dealing with. Each team worked on their specific component without knowing how it fit into the larger picture. Lazar's frustration was palpable. Here was technology that could benefit all of humanity, yet it was being kept secret. The official explanation was national security, but he suspected the real reason was more complex. The implications of this technology were so profound that it could destabilize entire economic and political systems overnight. Think about what would happen if anti-gravity technology became public. The oil industry would collapse. Traditional aerospace would become obsolete. The geopolitical balance of power would shift dramatically. Perhaps the secrecy wasn't just about protecting the technology, it was about protecting the existing order of things. But secrecy came at a cost. Without open scientific collaboration, progress was slow. The military mindset that demanded compartmentalization was exactly what prevented breakthroughs. Science thrives on the free exchange of ideas, on peer review, on building upon each other's work. By keeping this technology locked away, the very people who possessed it were limiting their ability to understand and develop it. Lazar believed that if this technology were released to the global scientific community, the advances would be exponential. Instead of a handful of researchers working in isolation, thousands of brilliant minds could contribute to unlocking its secrets. The result could be a new golden age of human achievement. Yet even decades later, the technology remained hidden. The project at S4 had apparently been moved, dismantled, or taken even deeper underground. The craft that Lazar worked on had vanished, along with any hope of reverse engineering their secrets in the near future. But the knowledge of what was possible remained. Somewhere in the classified world, people knew that gravity could be manipulated. They knew that space-time could be distorted. They knew that unlimited clean energy was achievable. The question wasn't whether this technology existed. It was whether humanity would ever be allowed to benefit from it. The desert wind carries secrets across the Nevada landscape, and among those secrets is perhaps the most important discovery in human history. A technology so revolutionary that it could transform our species from a planetary civilization to a galactic one. Yet it remains locked away, hidden from the very people who could benefit most from its promise. As we stand on the threshold of a new era of disclosure, as governments slowly acknowledge the reality of unexplained aerial phenomena, we must ask ourselves, how much more do they know? And when will they finally trust humanity with the truth about what's possible? The technology Bob Lazar described may have been alien in origin, but its implications are entirely human. It represents our potential, our future, and perhaps our greatest challenge. The question isn't whether we can handle the truth, it's whether we can handle the transformation that truth would bring. When we peel back the layers of Bob Lazar's story, we discover that the most extraordinary claims aren't just about flying saucers or anti-gravity propulsion. They're about something far more profound, something that challenges our understanding of reality itself. Because if Lazar's account is true, then the implications extend far beyond the confines of a secret Nevada facility and into the very fabric of our existence. The Element 115 reactor that Lazar described wasn't just a power source. It was a window into physics that our current scientific paradigm can barely comprehend. Think about it for a moment. We're talking about a device the size of a basketball that could generate more energy than a nuclear power plant, while simultaneously creating gravitational fields that could bend space and time. This isn't just advanced technology. This is technology that operates on principles that would revolutionize our understanding of the universe. But here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Lazar didn't just describe the technology, he described the process of reverse engineering it. And what he revealed about that process tells us something profound about the nature of scientific discovery itself. Because according to Lazar, the scientists at S4 weren't just trying to understand how the craft worked. They were trying to understand how to make it work with earthly materials and earthly manufacturing processes. This distinction is crucial. It suggests that the technology wasn't just foreign to human understanding. It was foreign to human capability. The materials, the construction methods, the very principles of operation were so far beyond our current technological base that even understanding them didn't immediately translate to replicating them. This is what makes Lazar's account so compelling from a scientific perspective. He wasn't describing magic. He was describing technology that was advanced but still bound by the laws of physics. The gravity amplifiers that Lazar described operated on what he called a distortion principle. Rather than fighting against gravity, they worked with it, bending space-time itself to create a kind of gravitational bubble around the craft. Inside this bubble, the normal rules of inertia and momentum didn't apply. The craft could make impossible turns, accelerate instantaneously, and hover silently because it wasn't moving through space in the traditional sense. It was moving space around itself. This concept aligns remarkably well with theoretical physics concepts that have emerged since Lazar first spoke publicly. The Alcubierre drive, proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre in 1994, describes a theoretical method of faster-than-light travel that works by contracting space in front of a spacecraft while expanding it behind. The parallels to Lazar's description are striking, especially considering that Lazar described these principles 5 years before Alcubierre published his paper. But the technological implications go even deeper. If the craft could manipulate gravitational fields, then it could potentially manipulate time itself. Einstein's theory of relativity tells us that gravity and time are intimately connected. Strong gravitational fields slow down time relative to weaker fields. This means that the craft Lazar described wasn't just a transportation device, it was potentially a time machine. The energy implications are equally staggering. The matter-antimatter reaction that Lazar described would indeed produce tremendous amounts of energy with virtually no waste. If such a system could be replicated and scaled, it would solve humanity's energy crisis overnight. No more fossil fuels, no more nuclear waste, no more environmental degradation from energy production. We're talking about clean, limitless energy that could power our civilization for millennia. Yet according to Lazar, this technology remained locked away, studied in secret by a small group of scientists working in isolation. The compartmentalization that he described wasn't just about security, it was about control. Because technology this revolutionary doesn't just change how we live, it changes who has power and how that power is distributed. Consider the geopolitical implications. A nation that possesses anti-gravity technology doesn't just have a military advantage, it has a civilization-level advantage. Transportation becomes instantaneous, energy becomes limitless. The very concept of national borders becomes meaningless when you can travel anywhere on Earth in a matter of minutes. This is why, according to Lazar, the technology was kept secret, not just from the public, but from most of the government itself. The scientific method that Lazar described at S4 was fundamentally different from traditional research. Instead of building up from basic principles, the scientists were working backward from a finished product. They were trying to understand not just how the technology worked, but why it worked. This reverse engineering approach required a completely different mindset, one that was willing to abandon preconceived notions about what was possible. Lazar's role in this process was specifically focused on the propulsion system. He wasn't trying to understand the craft's materials or its control systems. He was trying to understand how it moved. And what he discovered was that the craft didn't move in the way we understand movement. It manipulated the fundamental structure of space-time itself. The element 115 fuel that powered this system was described as stable, unlike the unstable isotopes that have been synthesized in particle accelerators. This stability was crucial because it allowed the element to be used as a consistent fuel source rather than a laboratory curiosity. When bombarded with protons, the element would undergo a controlled nuclear reaction that produced both energy and gravitational waves. These gravitational waves were then amplified and directed by the craft's waveguide system, creating the distortion field that allowed for the impossible maneuvers that Lazar witnessed. The entire system was elegant in its simplicity, even as it operated on principles that were centuries ahead of human science. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Lazar's account is what it suggests about the nature of scientific discovery itself. The craft represented a complete paradigm shift, not just in technology, but in our understanding of reality. It suggested that our current scientific models, while accurate within their limitations, were fundamentally incomplete. This is why Lazar's story has endured for over 3 decades. It's not just about UFOs or government cover-ups. It's about the possibility that we live in a universe far more strange and wonderful than we've ever imagined. It's about the idea that consciousness and technology and the fundamental forces of nature might be connected in ways we're only beginning to understand. The implications extend beyond technology into philosophy and even spirituality. If consciousness can interface with technology in the way Lazar described, then the boundary between mind and machine becomes blurred. If gravity can be controlled through consciousness, then the relationship between observer and observed becomes fundamentally different from what we currently understand. This is why Lazar's account continues to fascinate and frustrate in equal measure. It presents a vision of reality that is both thrilling and terrifying. Thrilling because it suggests that the universe is far more malleable than we thought. Terrifying because it suggests that we might not be ready for that kind of power. The question that haunts Lazar's story is not whether it's true. The question is whether we're ready for it to be true. Because if the technology he described really exists, then we're living in a world where the fundamental assumptions about reality that govern our lives are incomplete at best and completely wrong at worst. And that, perhaps, is the most profound implication of all. Bob Lazar didn't just claim to have worked on alien technology. He claimed to have glimpsed a future where humanity's relationship with the universe itself would be fundamentally transformed. Whether that glimpse was real or imagined, the vision it presents continues to challenge us to think beyond the boundaries of what we believe possible. In the end, the story of Bob Lazar is the story of human curiosity confronting the unknown. It's the story of what happens when we push against the boundaries of our understanding and discover that those boundaries might not be as fixed as we thought. And it's the story of a man who claimed to have seen the future and spent the rest of his life trying to help the rest of us prepare for it. The weight of carrying such extraordinary knowledge became increasingly apparent as Bob Lazar moved deeper into his later years. Unlike many whistleblowers who eventually seek vindication through public campaigns or media tours, Lazar seemed to retreat further into himself, as if the burden of what he'd witnessed had grown heavier with time rather than lighter. Those who knew him during this period described a man who appeared to be wrestling with something profound. Not regret, exactly, but a kind of existential fatigue. He had opened a door that could never be closed, shared secrets that could never be unshared, and in doing so had fundamentally altered not just his own life, but the lives of everyone who chose to believe him. The scientific community's relationship with Lazar remained complex and often contradictory. While mainstream physicists continued to dismiss his claims about element 115 and gravity manipulation, a growing number of researchers began quietly exploring the theoretical possibilities he had described. Papers on exotic matter, gravitational lensing, and space-time distortion appeared in peer-reviewed journals with increasing frequency, though rarely with any direct reference to Lazar's work. Perhaps most telling was the evolution of government disclosure. What had once been absolute denial gradually shifted to carefully worded acknowledgments of unexplained phenomena. The Pentagon's release of UFO footage in 2017 and the subsequent establishment of official UAP investigation programs felt, to many observers, like a vindication of everything Lazar had been saying for decades. Yet Lazar himself seemed almost detached from these developments. When asked about the government's changing stance on UFOs, he would often respond with a weary smile and a simple observation: "It's about time." There was no satisfaction in being proven right, no sense of triumph. If anything, he seemed saddened by how long it had taken for the world to catch up to truths he had carried alone for so many years. The technology, he described, continued to tantalize researchers around the world. Anti-gravity research, once relegated to the fringes of science, began attracting serious funding and attention. Private aerospace companies quietly recruited physicists to explore unconventional propulsion systems. The dream of gravity manipulation, first articulated by Lazar in the Nevada desert, had become a legitimate field of scientific inquiry. But perhaps the most profound impact of Lazar's story was not on science or government policy, but on human consciousness itself. He had planted a seed of possibility that refused to die. In an age of increasing technological capability and expanding cosmic awareness, his claims no longer seemed quite so impossible. The idea that we might not be alone, that advanced civilizations might have visited Earth, that revolutionary technologies might exist just beyond our current understanding, had become part of the cultural zeitgeist. Lazar's notebooks, filled with diagrams and calculations from his time at S4, remained locked away in a safe at his home. He had often been asked to publish them, to share the technical details that might advance human understanding of the propulsion systems he claimed to have studied, but he consistently refused, citing both security concerns and a deeper philosophical reservation about humanity's readiness for such knowledge. "We're not ready," he would say, when pressed on the subject. "We can barely handle the technology we have now. Imagine what we might do with something that could bend space and time itself." This reluctance spoke to one of the most unsettling aspects of Lazar's story. If the technology he described was real, if it was already in human hands, then the implications were staggering. The ability to travel instantaneously across vast distances, to manipulate gravity itself, to access energy sources beyond our current comprehension. Such capabilities would fundamentally alter the balance of power on Earth and beyond. The more one contemplated the possibilities, the more Lazar's decades of silence began to make sense. Perhaps he had shared just enough to prepare humanity for what was coming, but not so much as to accelerate our arrival at technologies we might not be equipped to handle responsibly. As the years passed, Lazar's role in the UFO community evolved from that of a controversial whistleblower to something approaching an elder statesman. Younger researchers would seek him out, hoping to learn from his experiences and gain insight into the phenomenon he had studied firsthand. But he remained cautious about encouraging others to follow his path, well aware of the personal costs involved in speaking out about such matters. The surveillance he had experienced in the early years after his disclosure had largely ended, but the psychological impact remained. He had learned to live with the knowledge that some secrets were too dangerous to share, that some truths were too powerful to be spoken freely. It was a burden that few could understand, and fewer still would choose to carry. Yet despite everything, Lazar never expressed complete regret about his decision to go public. In quiet moments, he would acknowledge that the story needed to be told, that humanity deserved to know they were not alone in the universe. The cost had been high, but the alternative, a world living in ignorance of its true place in the cosmos, seemed somehow worse. The desert where it all began remained largely unchanged. The mountains still rose from the Nevada landscape, their secrets buried deep beneath layers of rock and security. But something had shifted in the years since Lazar first spoke out. The veil of secrecy, once absolute, had begun to lift. Questions that had once been whispered in the shadows were now being asked in congressional hearings and scientific conferences. Bob Lazar had lit a candle in the darkness, and despite every effort to extinguish it, that flame continued to burn. It illuminated not just the possibility of extraterrestrial visitation, but the deeper questions about humanity's place in the universe, our readiness for advanced technology, and our responsibility to seek truth, even when that truth might be uncomfortable or dangerous. In the end, perhaps that was Lazar's greatest contribution, not the specific technical details of alien propulsion systems, but the courage to ask the questions that needed to be asked, to challenge the boundaries of what was considered possible, and to remind us that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we had dared to imagine. The story of Bob Lazar is ultimately a story about the power of truth to transcend the barriers erected to contain it. Like water finding its way through stone, the truth has a way of emerging, slowly but inevitably, reshaping the landscape of human understanding as it flows. And in that ongoing transformation, Lazar's voice continues to echo, a reminder that sometimes the most important truths come not from official sources or established institutions, but from individuals brave enough to speak out against the darkness, regardless of the personal cost. The shadows lengthened across the Nevada desert as decades passed, and Bob Lazar's story continued to evolve in ways that even he could never have anticipated. What began as a reluctant whistleblower's testimony in 1989 had transformed into something far more complex and enduring than anyone imagined. The world around his claims began to shift dramatically. In 2017, the Pentagon's acknowledgement of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program sent shockwaves through the UFO community. Suddenly, the very institutions that had once dismissed such phenomena were releasing official footage of unidentified aerial phenomena exhibiting precisely the kinds of behavior Lazar had described decades earlier. The tic-tac videos, the gimbal footage, the flyer recordings, all showed craft performing impossible maneuvers, objects that could accelerate instantaneously, change direction without inertia, and move in ways that defied conventional physics. To those who had followed Lazar's story, these weren't revelations, they were vindications. Luis Elizondo, the former Pentagon official who had overseen the program, spoke publicly about materials of unknown origin. Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, hinted at crash retrievals and reverse engineering programs. The very narrative that had once been confined to the fringes was now being discussed in the halls of Congress. But for Lazar, this gradual disclosure brought mixed emotions. On one hand, it validated much of what he had been saying for 30 years. The government had indeed been studying these phenomena. There were materials, there were craft, There were programs designed to understand technologies that appeared to be beyond human capability. On the other hand, it raised uncomfortable questions. If his story was true, if the government really had been reverse engineering alien technology since the 1980s, what progress had been made? Where were the breakthroughs? Why were we still burning fossil fuels and struggling with conventional propulsion when we supposedly had access to gravity manipulation technology? The element 115 that Lazar had described, once dismissed as fantasy, was synthesized in laboratories around the world. Though the versions created by scientists were unstable and decayed within milliseconds, their very existence proved that Lazar's claims weren't entirely fabricated. He had been talking about an element that didn't officially exist, using scientific terminology that wouldn't enter mainstream physics discussions for decades. Yet the synthesized moscovium bore little resemblance to the stable isotope Lazar claimed to have worked with. This discrepancy became a focal point for both believers and skeptics. Either Lazar had been mistaken about the properties of the element, or the version he encountered was indeed something not of this world. The hand scanners he had described at S4, once mocked as science fiction, were revealed to be real technology used at secure facilities. The bone density measurements, the biometric authentication systems, all of it existed, just as he had claimed. These small validations accumulated over time, creating a mosaic of credibility that was difficult to dismiss entirely. But perhaps the most significant development was the cultural shift around the UFO phenomenon itself. What had once been relegated to conspiracy theorists and fringe believers was now the subject of serious scientific inquiry. Harvard's Avi Loeb established the Galileo Project to search for evidence of extraterrestrial technology. The Pentagon created the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to investigate UAP sightings. NASA announced its own UAP study team. The stigma that had once surrounded anyone who dared to discuss these topics publicly was slowly evaporating. Pilots, military personnel, and government officials were coming forward with their own accounts of encounters with unexplained phenomena. The narrative was changing, and Bob Lazar found himself at the center of a story that was far from over. In his later interviews, Lazar spoke with the weariness of someone who had carried a burden for far too long. He had never sought the spotlight, never tried to profit from his claims, never wavered in his essential narrative. While details might vary from telling to telling, the core story remained consistent. He had worked on technology that shouldn't exist, in a place that officially didn't exist, on projects that were beyond anything in the conventional world. The technology he described, gravity amplifiers, antimatter reactors, stable super-heavy elements, remained tantalizingly out of reach. If such advances existed, they were still locked away in classified programs, far from the public eye. The promise of revolutionary propulsion systems, clean energy, and interstellar travel remained just that, a promise. Yet the questions Lazar raised continued to resonate. If we are not alone in the universe, if we have been visited by intelligences from other worlds, what does that mean for humanity's future? How do we prepare for contact? How do we ensure that such transformative technologies, if they exist, are used for the benefit of all mankind rather than as instruments of power and control? The scientific community began grappling with these questions in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence expanded beyond radio telescopes to include the hunt for technological signatures, evidence of advanced civilizations that might have already visited our solar system. Bob Lazar's story, whether true or false, had accomplished something remarkable. It had forced us to confront the possibility that we might not be alone, that our technology might not be as advanced as we believed, and that the universe might be far stranger and more wonderful than we had ever imagined. As the years passed, and more revelations emerged from government sources, Lazar's claims seemed less like the fantasies of a hoaxer and more like the testimony of someone who had glimpsed a reality that the rest of us were only beginning to understand. The truth, whatever it might be, was still out there, waiting to be discovered. And in the quiet moments between official disclosures and public revelations, in the space between belief and skepticism, Bob Lazar's story continued to echo through the corridors of possibility, a reminder that the universe still held secrets we were only beginning to comprehend. As we near the end of our investigation into Bob Lazar's extraordinary claims, it's crucial to examine the broader implications of what his story means for our understanding of reality itself. For over 3 decades, Lazar has maintained his account with remarkable consistency, describing technologies and propulsion systems that seemed impossible when he first spoke about them, yet have grown increasingly plausible as our scientific understanding has advanced. The most compelling aspect of Lazar's testimony isn't necessarily the specific details about element 115 or gravity amplifiers, though these remain fascinating. Rather, it's the way his story has evolved from fringe conspiracy theory to a topic worthy of serious scientific and governmental consideration. When the Pentagon released its UAP videos in 2020, acknowledging that unidentified aerial phenomena represent a genuine mystery, it vindicated many of the observations Lazar had been making since 1989. Consider the characteristics he described: silent propulsion systems, instantaneous acceleration, 90-degree turns at high speed, and the ability to hover motionless before darting away at impossible velocities. These same behaviors have been documented by trained military observers using sophisticated sensor equipment. The crafts observed by Navy pilots in incidents like the USS Nimitz encounter displayed precisely the type of physics-defying maneuvers that Lazar claimed to have witnessed during his alleged time at S4. What makes this particularly intriguing is that Lazar's description of how these crafts operate through gravity manipulation and space-time distortion aligns remarkably well with cutting-edge theoretical physics. While mainstream science in 1989 would have dismissed such concepts as fantasy, today's physicists routinely discuss exotic matter, negative energy densities, and the manipulation of space-time geometry as potential pathways to advanced propulsion. The element 115 revelation stands as perhaps the most striking vindication of Lazar's claims. When he first described this theoretical element as the fuel source for alien reactors, skeptics pointed to its absence from the periodic table as proof of his fabrication. Yet in 2003, scientists successfully synthesized moscovium, element 115, in particle accelerators. While the synthesized version proved unstable, decaying in milliseconds, Lazar had always maintained that the version used in the alien craft was a stable isotope unavailable on Earth. This raises profound questions about the nature of scientific discovery and technological development. If Lazar's account is accurate, it suggests that human scientific advancement may be following a path already mapped by non-human intelligence. The technologies he described, from antimatter reactors to gravitational field manipulation, represent potential futures for human civilization if we can master the underlying physics. The secrecy surrounding these technologies, if they exist, becomes more understandable when viewed through the lens of geopolitical strategy. A nation possessing functional gravity-based propulsion would hold an insurmountable military advantage. Such craft could reach any point on Earth instantaneously, operate without traditional fuel sources, and maneuver in ways that render conventional air defenses obsolete. The implications extend beyond military applications to energy production, space exploration, and transportation systems that could revolutionize human civilization. Yet the very nature of this technology may explain why progress has been so slow. Lazar himself emphasized that reverse engineering alien technology isn't simply a matter of understanding how it works, but of developing the materials, science, and manufacturing capabilities to reproduce it using terrestrial resources. It's the difference between observing a computer processor
and having the industrial capacity to manufacture semiconductors.
The compartmentalization that Lazar described at S4 reflects a fundamental tension in advanced research programs. While secrecy may be necessary for security reasons, it also inhibits the free exchange of ideas that drives scientific progress. The most groundbreaking discoveries often emerge from unexpected connections between disparate fields of study, something that becomes impossible when researchers are isolated in separate compartments. Perhaps most significantly, Lazar's story forces us to confront the possibility that we are not alone in the universe, and that contact has already occurred. The implications of this realization extend far beyond technology and science into philosophy, religion, and our fundamental understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. If non-human intelligence has been observing and potentially guiding our development, it challenges every assumption about our origins and destiny. The gradual shift in official discourse about UAPs suggests that we may be witnessing the early stages of a disclosure process. Government agencies that once dismissed UFO reports are now acknowledging that some phenomena remain unexplained by conventional science. This represents a dramatic change in the official narrative, one that brings us closer to the reality that Lazar described decades ago. As we stand at this crossroads between skepticism and acceptance, between the known and the unknown, Bob Lazar's story serves as both a warning and a promise. It warns us that the technologies capable of transforming our world may already exist, hidden behind walls of secrecy and compartmentalization. But it also promises that human ingenuity and scientific inquiry will eventually unlock these mysteries, leading us toward a future where the impossible becomes routine. The questions raised by Lazar's testimony continue to resonate because they touch on humanity's deepest aspirations and fears. Are we alone? Can we transcend the limitations of our current technology? What responsibilities come with knowledge that could reshape civilization? These are the questions that will define our species' next chapter, regardless of whether Bob Lazar's specific claims prove accurate. In the end, the truth about S4, Element 115, and gravity amplifiers may be less important than the broader conversation these claims have sparked. They have pushed us to question our assumptions, to consider possibilities beyond our current understanding, and to remain open to the extraordinary potential that lies hidden in the universe around us. Whether Bob Lazar was a whistleblower, a visionary, or something else entirely, his story has become part of humanity's ongoing quest to understand its place in an infinite cosmos filled with possibilities we are only beginning to imagine. The debate surrounding Bob Lazar's extraordinary claims reaches its crescendo when we examine the most compelling question of all: what happens next? For over 3 decades, his story has persisted, evolved, and gained surprising legitimacy through scientific developments and government disclosures that seemed impossible when he first spoke out in 1989. The recent acknowledgement by the Pentagon of unidentified aerial phenomena, the release of Navy pilot footage showing craft performing impossible maneuvers, and the gradual shift in scientific and governmental attitudes toward UFO research have created an entirely new landscape for evaluating Lazar's assertions. What once seemed like fringe conspiracy theory now occupies a space in mainstream discourse that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Perhaps most intriguingly, the technological descriptions Lazar provided decades ago continue to align with cutting-edge theoretical physics. The concept of manipulating space-time through gravitational fields mirrors research into the Alcubierre drive, a theoretical propulsion system that could enable faster-than-light travel by warping space around a spacecraft. While still purely theoretical, this work by physicist Miguel Alcubierre demonstrates that the fundamental principles Lazar described aren't outside the realm of scientific possibility. The synthesis of element 115, now officially recognized as moscovium, represents another fascinating convergence of Lazar's claims with subsequent scientific achievement. While the synthesized version remains highly unstable, lasting only milliseconds before decay, Lazar's assertion that stable isotopes might exist under different conditions or from extraterrestrial sources remains scientifically plausible. The theoretical island of stability in super-heavy elements suggests that certain configurations of protons and neutrons could indeed produce stable versions of these exotic materials. What makes Lazar's story particularly compelling is not just the consistency of his account, but the specificity of his technical descriptions. He didn't simply claim to have seen flying saucers. He provided detailed schematics of propulsion systems, described the internal layout of spacecraft, explained the physics of gravity manipulation, and even predicted the existence of elements that hadn't been discovered yet. These weren't vague, mystical pronouncements, but precise, technical specifications that could be evaluated against scientific principles. The implications of Lazar's claims extend far beyond the question of extraterrestrial visitation. If even a fraction of what he described is accurate, it would represent a fundamental shift in our understanding of physics, energy production, and space travel. The ability to manipulate gravity would revolutionize transportation, eliminate the need for fossil fuels, and open up possibilities for interstellar exploration that currently exist only in science fiction. Consider the energy implications alone. Lazar described a reactor smaller than a basketball that could generate more power than a nuclear plant, with no radioactive waste and no heat signature. Such technology would solve humanity's energy crisis overnight, providing unlimited clean power that could transform civilization. The propulsion system he described would make current rockets look like horse-drawn carriages, enabling instantaneous travel across vast distances by folding space itself. Yet the very magnitude of these implications raises questions about why such technology would remain hidden. Lazar suggested that the secrecy stems from both the potential for weaponization and the disruptive effect such revelations would have on existing power structures. Technologies that could eliminate scarcity, render current military capabilities obsolete, and fundamentally alter the global economy would indeed pose challenges to established institutions. The question of extraterrestrial origin adds another layer of complexity. If the technology Lazar described came from another world, it would confirm that humanity is not alone in the universe, and that we have been visited by intelligences far more advanced than our own. This revelation would have profound implications for religion, philosophy, and our understanding of our place in the cosmos. Some researchers have suggested that the craft Lazar described might not be extraterrestrial at all, but rather represent a breakthrough in human technology, perhaps based on recovered alien materials or reverse-engineered systems. This possibility would still represent a monumental leap forward, but would raise different questions about technological suppression and the concentration of advanced capabilities in classified programs. The timing of recent disclosures seems particularly significant. The Pentagon's acknowledgement of UAPs, the release of previously classified footage, and the changing tone of official statements suggest a gradual shift toward greater transparency. Whether this represents genuine disclosure or a carefully managed information campaign remains unclear, but it has certainly created an environment where Lazar's claims seem less outlandish than they once did. The scientific community's response has been mixed, but increasingly open-minded. While many researchers remain skeptical of Lazar's specific claims, there is growing interest in the broader questions his story raises. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has gained renewed legitimacy, with prestigious institutions now dedicating resources to the study of potentially anomalous phenomena. The technological aspects of Lazar's story continue to inspire researchers and inventors. Projects exploring breakthrough propulsion concepts, exotic matter research, and gravitational manipulation have emerged from both academic institutions and private companies. While none have achieved the capabilities Lazar described,
The fact that serious scientists are pursuing these avenues suggests that the underlying physics may not be as impossible as once thought. The human element of Lazar's story remains equally compelling. His reluctance to capitalize on his fame, his consistent refusal to embellish or modify his account, and his apparent desire to simply return to a normal life all speak to a credibility that many find convincing. Hoaxes typically seek attention and profit, yet Lazar has consistently avoided both, maintaining his story without variation while trying to minimize his public profile.
The broader implications of the Lazar phenomenon extend beyond the specifics of his claims to questions about truth, authority, and the nature of scientific progress. His story challenges conventional notions of how breakthrough discoveries are made and disseminated, suggesting that the most significant developments in human history might occur in secrecy, hidden from the very people who might benefit most from them. As we stand at this crossroads of disclosure and discovery, the questions raised by Bob Lazar's remarkable claims become more urgent. Whether his story represents truth, fiction, or something in between, it has succeeded in opening minds to possibilities that were once dismissed out of hand. The technologies he described, the physics he outlined, and the implications he suggested have all moved from the realm of impossibility into the space of serious consideration. The ultimate vindication or refutation of Lazar's claims may still lie ahead. As our understanding of physics advances, as new technologies emerge, and as official attitudes toward UFO phenomena continue to evolve, we may finally have the tools and the openness necessary to evaluate his assertions properly. Until then, his story remains a fascinating enigma, a window into possibilities that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about reality, technology, and our place in the universe. In the end, Bob Lazar's legacy may not be the specific details of his claims, but rather the questions he compelled us to ask and the boundaries he challenged us to cross. Whether whistleblower or storyteller, whether witness or visionary, he has fundamentally altered the conversation about what might be possible in our universe. And in a cosmos vast beyond imagination, filled with mysteries we have barely begun to comprehend, perhaps that shift in perspective is the most valuable contribution of all. As we approach the end of this extraordinary journey through Bob Lazar's claims and their far-reaching implications, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of science, secrecy, and the infinite possibilities that await humanity among the stars. The story of Bob Lazar is not merely about one man's alleged experiences at a hidden facility in the Nevada desert. It represents something far more profound, a mirror reflecting our deepest questions about technological advancement, government transparency, and our place in the cosmic order. The technical consistency of Lazar's descriptions, maintained across decades of scrutiny and analysis, continues to astound researchers and skeptics alike. His detailed explanations of gravity wave amplifiers, Omicron radiation, and the unique properties of element 115 were not borrowed from existing scientific literature or popular culture. Instead, they emerged from what appears to be direct, hands-on experience with technology that operates on principles barely understood by our current scientific paradigms. The precision with which he described the sport model's reactor configuration, the waveguide construction, and the gravitational field manipulation systems suggests an intimate familiarity that would be nearly impossible to fabricate without extensive knowledge of advanced physics. What makes Lazar's account particularly compelling is how subsequent scientific discoveries have validated many of his seemingly impossible claims. When he first spoke about element 115 in 1989, the scientific community had not yet synthesized any isotopes of this super-heavy element. The periodic table ended at element 109, and the concept of an island of stability for super-heavy elements was purely theoretical. Yet Lazar described not just the existence of element 115, but its specific properties as a fuel source capable of producing antimatter through bombardment with protons. Today, we know that moscovium, element 115, exists exactly where Lazar said it would be, and while our synthesized versions are highly unstable, theoretical models suggest that certain isotopes could indeed possess the stability he described. The implications of Lazar's gravity wave descriptions have become even more significant in light of recent scientific achievements. His explanation of how the alien craft created localized distortions in space-time, essentially falling toward their destination rather than traveling through space conventionally, aligns remarkably well with our evolving understanding of gravitational physics. The detection of gravitational waves by LIGO in 2015 confirmed that these ripples in space-time are real phenomena, lending credibility to Lazar's claims about gravity manipulation technology. His description of the craft's ability to amplify and focus gravity waves to create propulsion represents a technological application that our science is only beginning to theoretically explore. The energy implications of Lazar's revelations cannot be overstated. If his descriptions of element 115's properties are accurate, we are looking at an energy source that could revolutionize human civilization. The ability to extract enormous amounts of power from tiny amounts of matter, producing clean energy without the radioactive waste associated with current nuclear technology, would solve humanity's energy crisis virtually overnight. This technology could power interstellar travel, eliminate fossil fuel dependence, and provide unlimited clean energy for all human activities. The question becomes, if such technology exists, why has it been kept hidden from the world? The secrecy surrounding Lazar's claims raises profound questions about the nature of government classification and the withholding of potentially transformative technologies. The compartmentalized structure he described at S4, where workers were kept isolated from one another and given only minimal information about their specific tasks, reflects a level of security that suggests something of extraordinary importance was being protected. The psychological testing, the monitoring, and the extreme measures taken to maintain secrecy all point to a program dealing with information that could fundamentally alter human understanding of physics and our place in the universe. Recent government acknowledgements about unidentified aerial phenomena have added new dimensions to the Lazar narrative. The Pentagon's release of videos showing craft exhibiting flight characteristics that defy conventional aerodynamics, the establishment of official UAP investigation programs, and testimonies from military personnel describing encounters with objects displaying impossible performance capabilities all echo the descriptions Lazar provided decades earlier. These official admissions represent a significant shift in government transparency about phenomena that were previously dismissed or ridiculed. The craft described by military witnesses demonstrate instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns at high speeds, and the ability to hover silently before disappearing at incredible velocities. These performance characteristics match exactly what Lazar described about the sport model and other craft he claimed to have worked on. The lack of visible propulsion systems, the absence of sonic booms despite supersonic speeds, and the apparent immunity to inertial effects all align with the gravity-based propulsion system he detailed in his technical explanations. Commander David Fravor's encounter with the tic-tac-shaped object during the USS Nimitz incident provides perhaps the most compelling parallel to Lazar's claims. Fravor described an object that appeared to anticipate his movements, demonstrated instantaneous acceleration without visible propulsion, and exhibited flight characteristics that seemed to ignore the laws of physics as we understand them. The object's ability to disappear from one location and reappear at another, combined with its smooth, seamless construction without visible seams or control surfaces, matches Lazar's descriptions of the alien craft's appearance and capabilities. The scientific community's response to these revelations has been mixed, but increasingly open to serious investigation. Researchers like Dr. Hal Puthoff and Dr. Eric Davis have published papers exploring the theoretical possibilities of advanced propulsion systems based on space-time manipulation.
Their work on the Alcubierre drive concept and other exotic propulsion theories provides mathematical frameworks that could potentially explain the phenomena Lazar described. The fact that serious scientists are now publishing peer-reviewed research on topics that were once considered purely science fiction demonstrates how the boundaries of acceptable scientific inquiry have expanded. The cultural impact of Lazar's revelations extends far beyond the UFO community. His story has influenced science fiction, inspired countless researchers to explore unconventional physics, and contributed to a growing public demand for government transparency about classified programs. The narrative has become a touchstone for discussions about technological suppression, the ethics of secrecy, and the responsibility of governments to share potentially beneficial technologies with humanity. Educational institutions are beginning to take these subjects more seriously as well. Universities are establishing programs to study anomalous phenomena, and students are pursuing advanced degrees in physics with the specific goal of understanding the principles behind advanced propulsion systems. The stigma once associated with researching these topics is gradually diminishing as more credible witnesses come forward and more evidence emerges supporting the reality of advanced aerial phenomena.
The international implications of Lazar's claims deserve careful consideration. If the United States government has indeed been reverse engineering alien technology since the 1980s or earlier, this represents a technological advantage that could fundamentally alter global power structures. The nation that first successfully replicates and deploys gravity-based propulsion technology would possess capabilities that make current military and transportation systems obsolete. This reality may explain the extreme secrecy surrounding these programs and the reluctance to share information even with close allies. The ethical dimensions of technological suppression raise uncomfortable questions about the responsibilities of those in power. If clean, unlimited energy technology exists and is being withheld, how many environmental disasters could have been prevented? How many conflicts over resources could have been avoided? The moral implications of keeping such technology secret while humanity struggles with climate change, energy poverty, and environmental degradation are staggering. These questions force us to examine the structures of power and secrecy that may be preventing humanity from accessing technologies that could solve our most pressing challenges. The psychological impact of Lazar's revelations on human consciousness cannot be ignored. The possibility that we are not alone in the universe, that more advanced civilizations exist, and that their technology is being studied in secret facilities fundamentally challenges our understanding of human uniqueness and technological progress. This knowledge, if true, would require a complete re-evaluation of our place in the cosmic hierarchy and our assumptions about the development of civilization. The religious and philosophical implications are equally profound. Many belief systems would need to be reconsidered in light of confirmed extraterrestrial contact and the existence of civilizations far more advanced than our own. The questions raised about the nature of consciousness, the possibility of life throughout the universe, and the potential for human evolution beyond our current limitations challenge fundamental assumptions about existence itself. As we look toward the future, several scenarios emerge from the Lazar narrative. The first involves gradual disclosure, where governments slowly release information about advanced technologies and extraterrestrial contact, allowing humanity to adjust to these revelations over time. This approach might minimize social disruption while gradually preparing society for the full truth. The second scenario involves continued secrecy, with these technologies remaining hidden within classified programs, while public UAP investigations serve as limited hangouts to manage public curiosity without revealing the full scope of government knowledge. A third possibility involves breakthrough disclosure, where the weight of evidence becomes so overwhelming that full revelation becomes inevitable. This scenario might result from technological developments that make concealment impossible. Whistleblower revelations that expose the full scope of secret programs or contact events that cannot be hidden from public view. Each scenario carries different implications for human civilization and our future development. The technological trajectory suggested by Lazar's claims points toward a future where humanity could join a galactic community of advanced civilizations. The mastery of gravity manipulation technology would enable interstellar travel, opening up possibilities for exploration, colonization, and contact with other intelligent species. The energy abundance made possible by Element 115 technology could eliminate scarcity, transform economic systems, and allow for unprecedented human flourishing. However, the transition to such advanced capabilities would require careful management to prevent social upheaval and ensure equitable distribution of benefits. The concentration of such powerful technologies in the hands of a few individuals or nations could create unprecedented inequalities and conflicts. The challenge would be developing governance structures capable of managing technologies that could transform or destroy human civilization. The scientific revolution implied by Lazar's claims would require fundamental changes in how we approach education, research, and technological development. Our current scientific paradigms, based on centuries of incremental discovery, would need to be expanded to accommodate new understanding of space-time, gravity, and the nature of reality itself. This transformation would likely accelerate human technological development in ways we can barely imagine. The story of Bob Lazar ultimately serves as a catalyst for broader questions about truth, power, and human potential. Whether his claims are entirely accurate or not, they have succeeded in opening discussions about possibilities that were previously unthinkable. They have challenged us to consider what might be possible if we moved beyond the limitations of current scientific dogma and embraced more expansive visions of technological capability. The courage required to come forward with such extraordinary claims, knowing the personal and professional consequences that would follow, speaks to the importance Lazar placed on sharing this information with humanity. His willingness to endure decades of scrutiny, ridicule, and harassment suggests a deep conviction that this knowledge belongs to all of humanity, not just a select few with security clearances. As we conclude this exploration of Bob Lazar's shocking claims, we are left with more questions than answers, but perhaps that is exactly as it should be. The greatest discoveries in human history have always begun with someone willing to challenge conventional wisdom and propose seemingly impossible possibilities. Whether Lazar's specific claims prove to be accurate or not, his story has succeeded in expanding our conception of what might be possible and inspiring countless individuals to pursue knowledge that could transform human civilization. The truth about what happened at S4, the reality of alien technology, and the extent of government knowledge about extraterrestrial phenomena may eventually be revealed through official disclosure, scientific breakthrough, or the gradual accumulation of evidence that makes denial impossible. Until then, the story of Bob Lazar serves as a reminder that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we have yet imagined, and that the next great leap in human understanding may come from the most unexpected sources. The implications of Bob Lazar's revelations extend far beyond the realm of UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. If his claims hold even a fraction of truth, we're looking at a fundamental shift in how we understand physics, energy production, and our place in the cosmos. The technology he described doesn't just represent an advancement in our current scientific trajectory, it represents a complete paradigm shift that could revolutionize every aspect of human civilization. Consider the energy crisis that has plagued humanity for decades. Lazar's descriptions of element 115 and its ability to generate massive amounts of clean energy through gravity wave manipulation could solve our energy problems overnight. No more dependence on fossil fuels, no more nuclear waste, no more environmental degradation from power generation. We're talking about technology that could provide unlimited clean energy for the entire planet, fundamentally altering geopolitics and eliminating energy scarcity as a driver of conflict. The propulsion systems Lazar described would make space travel as routine as air travel is today. Imagine being able to reach Mars in hours instead of months, or exploring the outer planets of our solar system with the same ease we currently visit other continents. This technology wouldn't just open up our solar system for exploration and colonization, it would make interstellar travel a genuine possibility, potentially allowing humanity to become a multi-system species within our lifetimes. But perhaps the most profound implication is what this technology tells us about the nature of reality itself. If gravity can be manipulated as easily as Lazar suggests, then our understanding of space and time is fundamentally incomplete. The ability to distort space-time for propulsion purposes suggests that the fabric of reality is far more malleable than we've ever imagined. This opens up possibilities that sound like science fiction, but could become science fact, from time dilation effects to potentially even more exotic phenomena. The question of government secrecy looms large over all of this. If such technology exists and has been hidden from public view for decades, it represents one of the most significant cover-ups in human history. The suppression of technology that could solve climate change, energy crises, and open up the cosmos to human exploration would be a betrayal of humanity's potential on an unprecedented scale. Yet from a government perspective, the implications of releasing such technology are staggering. The geopolitical upheaval, the economic disruption, and the social changes would be unlike anything in human history. Recent developments have only added weight to Lazar's claims. The Pentagon's acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, the release of military footage showing objects performing impossible maneuvers, and the growing acceptance within government circles that something unexplained is occurring in our skies, all support the possibility that Lazar was telling the truth decades before anyone was ready to listen. The scientific community's response to Lazar's claims has been mixed, but increasingly open-minded. While many scientists remain skeptical of his specific assertions, the broader questions he raises about advanced propulsion, exotic matter, and the manipulation of fundamental forces are now legitimate areas of research. Projects investigating metamaterials, anti-gravity effects, and exotic propulsion systems are being pursued by respected institutions and government agencies worldwide. What makes Lazar's story particularly compelling is its consistency over time. Despite decades of scrutiny, legal pressure, and personal attacks, his core narrative has remained unchanged. He's never sought to profit significantly from his claims, never embellished his story for dramatic effect, and has consistently maintained a reluctant stance toward public attention. This behavioral pattern is more consistent with someone telling a difficult truth than with someone perpetrating an elaborate hoax. The element 115 validation was particularly significant. When Lazar first described this super-heavy element and its properties in the late 1980s, it didn't exist in any laboratory on Earth. The fact that scientists later synthesized it and found it to have some of the characteristics he described lends credibility to his other claims. While the synthesized versions are unstable and don't exhibit the properties Lazar described, the fact that stable isotopes might exist under different conditions remains a theoretical possibility. The broader implications for humanity's future are staggering. If we are indeed not alone in the universe, and if we have access to technology that could transform our civilization, then we're standing at the threshold of a new era in human history. The choices we make about how to handle this knowledge and technology will determine whether we enter a golden age of exploration and discovery, or continue to struggle with the same problems that have plagued us for centuries. Bob Lazar's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about truth, secrecy, and the nature of progress. Whether you believe his claims or not, the questions he raises about government transparency, scientific advancement, and humanity's potential are worth serious consideration. In an era where the impossible seems to become possible with increasing frequency, Dismissing extraordinary claims without proper investigation may be the greatest mistake we could make. Whether Bob Lazar is telling the truth or spinning an elaborate tale, his story has fundamentally changed how we think about government secrecy and the possibility of extraterrestrial technology. The consistency of his claims over 30 years, combined with recent government admissions about unidentified aerial phenomena, suggests we may be witnessing the slow revelation of one of humanity's greatest secrets. The implications extend far beyond simple confirmation of alien visitation. If Lazar's descriptions of gravity manipulation and element 115 propulsion systems are accurate, we're looking at technology that could revolutionize energy production, transportation, and our understanding of physics itself. Imagine a world powered by clean, limitless energy sources, where interstellar travel becomes as routine as international flights. Yet this also raises uncomfortable questions about decades of potential suppression. How many breakthrough technologies have been hidden from public view? What other scientific revelations might be locked away in classified facilities? The ethical implications are staggering when we consider global challenges like climate change and energy scarcity that such technology could potentially solve. Recent government disclosures through the Pentagon's UAP reports and congressional hearings suggest a gradual shift toward transparency. Whether this represents a controlled release of information or genuine acknowledgement of phenomena beyond our current understanding remains unclear. Bob Lazar's claims force us to confront the possibility that we live in a universe far stranger and more populated than we've been told. His story challenges us to question official narratives, demand transparency from our institutions, and remain open to paradigm-shifting discoveries that could redefine humanity's place in the cosmos. As we await further revelations, Lazar's account serves as a reminder that the truth, however extraordinary, may be more incredible than any fiction we could imagine. The question isn't whether we're alone in the universe, but whether we're ready to handle the answer.